Welcome to the Asia and Pacific region.
Hello everyone. Congratulate TRANSED in 2022. I am Hiro Kitagawa from Kinda University. Today, I am delighted to introduce the effort of Japan, Hong Kong, and India as welcome by representative of Asia session.
Asia is the Earth's largest and most populous continent, located primarily in the eastern and northern hemispheres. This region includes the Pacific Islands countries. We will start with Japan.
Since 2000, Japan has made rapid progress in its approach to accessible transport, which focuses on railway stations. One reason for this is the aging population of Japan. By 2022, the population of elderly people aged 65 and over will be 28.8%. Accessible environmental improvement was recognized as a countermeasure against rapid aging. The law was established under the name of barrier-free. Of course, it is also the result of movement by people with disabilities that has continued since the 1960s. The first action was in 1981, International Year of Disabled Persons, as a starting point. It started with the establishment of the Guideline for Public Transportation Accessibility and Mobility Standard. Facility development began in the 1990s with the creation of ordinances by Japanese prefectures and the major cities. In the 2000s, the Transportation Barrier-Free Law, Principle of Universal Design Policy, and the new Barrier-Free Act were established to improve accessibility. The point is that local governments should create a barrier-free basic plan. In the 2010s, the Anti-Discrimination Act was established. Along with the Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games, they created an action plan called Universal Design 2020. According to an announcement by Japan's Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and tourism in 2019. Over 90% of railroad facilities were eliminations of level differences, installing rail blocks and accessible toilets, and 75% of accessible train. The concept of accessibility has centered around technical facilities. Along with this, guidelines have been established for toilets, tactile blocks, signals, sound facilities, vehicles, and so on. And accessible standards have been maintained. In particular, the topics of the last few years have been elimination of steps and gaps on platforms, and control platform screen doors called platform doors. They are installed in metro area and city trains. This may be a feature of Japanese railways with a large number of passengers. Now, it has been installed platform door systems that address the issue of the differences in the number of the door location. For tactile warning blocks, a mix of guiding lines has been widely implemented at so many platforms including local area train. And the most important thing is the planning. Local governments take the initiative to develop master plans. It is made with the participation of people with disabilities. The plan accommodates people with disabilities in accessible design. And since it is created according to each station, original plans are being developed in various places. The Transportation Barrier-Free Law requires training for operators of transportation providers. For this training, it is building hospitality while communicating with people with disabilities through their lectures. From now on, these efforts will increase in preparation for the Osaka Kansai Expo. I will introduce a video about accessible information environment. This is a private initiative, but in the future, governments, transport providers, companies, and people with disabilities will work together to develop accessible transport in Japan.
Struggles wheelchair users face can range from entering a restaurant, finding an accessible toilet, to finding an elevator. In Japan alone, 1 in 60 people is in a wheelchair. However, I don't see them around that much. Still, if people continue sharing accessible information on WeLog, that can change drastically. If a place is accessible to me, I can lead the way for other wheelchair users, and not only wheelchair users. Let's make the world better together.
We will continue with Hong Kong.
Good morning, everybody. This is Joseph from Hong Kong. So I'd like to share with you our progress in Hong Kong. We, of course, in Hong Kong has adopted the UNCRPD way back in 2008, in particular looking at equal access to transportation. It's a population of over 7.4 million people. We have about 1.5 million people who are 65 years and above, of which 500,000 people are people with disabilities. We have various types of transport, both public transportation and specialized transportation. You can see public transportation with various types, from railway systems, taxis, ferries, minibuses, trams, and public buses. We also have a number of specialized transportation, including different types of center buses, elderly bus service, and of course our rehab bus service. Our main line is probably a while away from the MTR, the mass transit system, of which we now have about 10 lines with 98 stations, which carry a capacity of about 4.6 million people per day. So it's a fairly heavily used system, and it's very extensive for us in Hong Kong. And so these are the facilities that we provided within our system, like special seating, signage, audible systems for the visually impaired, and even access to guide dogs. Since this system started over 30 years ago, we've actually come back and retrofitted some of the not accessible stations with different lifts, stair lifts, wheelchair aids, and now of course wider gates, etc. And we are now providing accessible washrooms and toilets within the stations, tactile guide paths, tactile maps, and audible maps, etc. In terms of public buses, we have 5 operators, which runs about over 700 routes. The number of buses we have is over 6,000 vehicles, and the passenger trips are about 30 million. Now we're happy to report that 99% of our low-floor buses are wheelchair accessible. And this has taken us over 20 odd years to achieve. Of course, we have wheelchair spaces inside the buses, priority seating, and information panels, etc. In terms of taxis, we have over 18,000 taxis with over 1 million daily patronage on taxis. Unfortunately, only 12% of these taxis are wheelchair accessible. As you can see, there are different types of taxis in terms of the private operators, taxis from 2010, 2015, and 2019 of different types of smaller private enterprises that running accessible taxis. Within the taxis, we do have things like braille signs, vehicle registrations. In terms of minibuses, we have over 4,000 of these green minibuses, and the daily patronage is almost 0.9 of a million, 900,000 people. At the moment, we only have 3 of these on a trial basis. These are low-floor, wheelchair accessible light buses. We also have ferries, about 19 lines to various outlying islands, and our passengers are about 31 million passengers annually. And of course, our piers are now becoming more accessible, our gangplanks accessible, and even on the ferries, we do have accessible space for passengers in wheelchairs. We have tramways on the main road, and also have the big tram. In terms of specialized transport, the Hong Kong Society for Reputation basically provides majority of the specialized transportation systems. In terms of rehab buses, we have over 188 vehicles, and the passenger trips is about 630,000 per year. And we have district type buses and hired buses. Specialized transport, we have non-emergency ambulance transfer systems. Of course, we have school buses, we have center buses, which are getting to be more accessible. Still, our major problems is that we don't have enough wheelchair accessible taxis. We have less than 100 at the moment. Many buses are not wheelchair accessible, especially to the public hospitals. And as I mentioned before, the tramways and peak trams are not accessible at the moment. These are the major concerns. We're trying to promote this concept of transport for all. We're asking government to provide incentives and sponsorship for the operators in order to increase the number of wheelchair accessible taxis and increase the number of low-floor minibuses. Thank you very much.
Let's continue with an overview from India. According to the 2011 Indian census, almost 3% of Indian population have a disability. 8.6% of Indian population are older persons. India's elderly population to rise 41% over next decade. Data shows that accessible transportation systems require be a top priority. To implement the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities (CRPD), India has the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act in 2016. This act includes access to transport and mandatory accessible infrastructure and services, among other rights, as an affirmative action. The Government of India launched the Accessible India campaign on 3rd December 2015. One of the topics is transportation system accessibility. This campaign has 3 objectives to be achieved by June 2022: enhancing the proportion of accessible airports, railway stations, and public transport. All 35 international airports in India are accessible to persons with disabilities and have dedicated counters, accessible toilets, and other services such as Delhi Airport. Indian Railways is managed by the Government of India, has started to achieve access at railway stations in major cities. Today, around 3,300 coaches are in service with wider entrance doors and aisles, handrails on side walls, space between berths for wheelchairs and larger toilets. The Van Bharat Express has plans to add 75 trains by 2023 with space for wheelchair users, braille signage, accessible on-board toilet. Improvements are being addressed in phases, short and long term. Learning from other countries has ensured the access features are introduced from day one. For example, Delhi Metro adopted lift access, tactile guidance, handrails on both sides of stairs and ramps, wider access gates, level boarding to coaches, and escort support by the metro staff for travelers with disabilities for free. Platform screen doors at stations and dedicated space for wheelchair passengers have been added at Metro Rail. India is a union of states. Buses, taxis, and paratransit are largely governed by each state. While few states are doing exceptionally good, many are still struggling with mixed fleet of standard floor buses and low floor buses. As per February 2022 data, only 8.73% of government-owned buses in India were fully accessible. 30% were partially accessible, as against the target of 25%. Delhi, the capital city, is moving from CNG-fueled low-floor buses to low-floor electric buses. Currently, Delhi has about 7,373 public transport buses, including low-floor AC and non-AC buses and semi-low-floor buses with hydraulic lifts. By December 2025, Delhi is planning to achieve 80% of accessible electric bus fleet. Different ministries are issuing standards of accessibility after wide public consultations. For example, Indian Railways, Airport Authority of India, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Ministry of Tourism, Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways, Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. By the end of 2022, most of these guidelines will become enforceable at court of law. Stakeholders have used the courts to hasten up implementation of 100% accessibility instead of a small percentage for public transport buses. The Supreme Court of India and various state high courts have issued important judgments to purchase new accessible bus fleets. Stay tuned for next actions in India. Thank you for making this video happen. Japan, Hiroshi Kitagawa, Yoshito Dobashi, Isashi Emori, Katsushi Sato. Hong Kong, SAR, Joseph Kwan, Mike Chung, Pamela Leung. India, Subhash Vashist. Other sources: Willog App Japan, National Statistical Office NSO's Elderly in India 2021 report, The Print Newspaper India, Indian Railway Portal, Disability Rights India. Disclaimer: the compilation of this video is in its original format and has not been modified. It is not a statement or opinion of the TRANSED2022 conference.